Here comes a new challenger!
Follow my path.
Going on, you guys? Theo here with the big review, and today is going to be the big review for the boy Dellons. So as I've promised you the past couple of days since I pulled him on release night, we were going to take some time to kind of get to know the guy, see if we were compatible or not, see if he was everything he was cracked up to be. Now, I would argue that Dellons probably had the most hype behind him leading up to release of the Seven Knights collab. You could make a case for maybe Shane for simp reasons, or even Rudy just because, you know, he's the face that runs the place. But with Dellons here, he has that edgelord power, and everybody had kind of looked at him and said, you know what, maybe this collab isn't so bad, maybe not. And then once we finally got a little bit of confirmation of what his skill set would be, primarily the fact that he would be using darkness primarily as his source of dot damage, that was pretty much it. That was the point where everybody went, you know what, yeah, this guy, I want to see what he looks like. And we now know, and I think the cat is out of the bag at this point. I don't think it took very long for people to realize that he is the real deal. So therefore, today we are going to be going through, as I have my Dellons at level 49, and we are going to be taking him to 50, probably in this video. I won't spoil anything, but we're going to take a look at him. I have compiled some footage over the past couple of days of playing with him, learning how to use him, and wanted to go ahead and give you guys a full review of Dellons. So let's jump into it. So the first thing that I want to get into is going to be his cores. So when we go through Dellons' cores here, you're going to see that he has the Seven Knights increases attack by 20% and decreases damage received by 20% when HP is 50% or more. That is going to be across the board for all the Seven Knights characters, so nothing different there. So let's look at his unique cores. So first one would be Snold Black Scythe. Going to increase active skill damage by 30% for 5 seconds upon landing Breath of Death, and 100% chance to reset cooldown of Deadly Strike. So right away, a reset on any of your active skills is always welcome. So then we have Death Lord, and that is going to increase penetration for 300 for 5 seconds with each attack, and it stacks up to 5. He also has a PvP exclusive, which doesn't really pertain to anything going on in this video. If you were looking for an in-depth PvP review, I am not going to be your guy in this video. This is going to strictly be for PvE, but I digress. PvP exclusive, 50% chance to disable targets' active skills for 2 seconds upon landing an active skill. So for PvP, that's pretty good. I will say I do not believe Dellons to be an effective pick for championship or live PvP. I could be wrong. I don't necessarily do PvP anywhere near as much as some of the best out there, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. I would like to be wrong in this case, but let's take a look at his other cores here. He does have a 20% power charge rate increase, and then he has a plus 842 as attack, and then he's going to have skill enhanced, 6% blast skill attack damage increase. So not too shabby. Another nice thing about him is that 320 penetration increase, so that's not bad. So yeah, overall, Dellons has some pretty nice cores. I would say that they're not necessarily anything too broken, but hey, that is not where his true power lies. We're going to get into that in a minute. Now the next thing I want to take a look at here is you'll notice that his leadership skill is all the 7 knights are going to basically boost their corresponding element color by 55% attack. That is awesome, specifically for modes where you need a little bit of extra damage or you want to just have a good generic blue leader. Now blue does tend to have some of the, I don't want to say weaker characters in the game, but it does tend to not be as stacked as other colors, so Dellons is a huge boon in this department. Specifically for modes like Reviving Hell's Dungeon, where you can set him as your leader and give that increase to whatever other 2 blue characters you are using. However, I will say that if you invest enough into Dellons, then there is a very good chance that you won't ever even really need to use the other 2 characters on that team. I'm just going to point that out now. Dellons is, not to spoil the overall review on this video, but Dellons is the best blue in the game. I'm perfectly willing to make that assessment now. There is really no other character that stacks up to him. If you look at the other blue characters in the game, they just don't have the amount of raw stats or raw power that this character has. And that is mostly due to the imprint stones situation, thanks to the 7 Knights collab. We'll get into those in a second, but the next thing I want to get into is going to be his skills. So we're going to go ahead and go through these real quick. So you've got Deadly Strike. Applies blackout for 6 seconds to the target upon landing a skill. And as we all know, that's going to deal darkness damage equal to 30% of attack every 1 second and decreases power by 2%. He also has a 30% chance to ignore target's guard upon landing a successful attack. Another reason why Dellons is probably not going to be a PvP monster is because his guard crash is nowhere near where it needs to be for PvP relevancy. Usually the cutoff for that, I would say, is probably around 70%-ish to be considered in the top tiers. But again, this is not going to be a PvP review. Just figured I'd throw that in there. Next up, you've got Breath of Death, his S2. His S2 is going to inflict damage equal to a 702% of attack to an enemy, and he becomes immune to damage for 3 seconds. He's also going to have a PvP exclusive effect there, which is target cannot activate buffs from active skills for 4 seconds upon landing a skill, which is very good. It's not bad at all. They did give him a couple of PvP options. Again, he's not the best for that, but the immunity is nice. He does need the protection. As we will go over further into the video, his only real downside is the same downside as most attack options out there, and that is that he does tend to be a little bit squishy. So, next up we have his S3, which is Grim Reaper's Shadow. And that's going to give him super armor for 3 seconds when using a skill, and he applies blackout for 6 seconds to the target upon landing a skill, deals darkness damage equal to 30% of attack every 1 second, and decreases power by 2%. So that is going to be his other source of darkness. He has tons and tons of darkness, which, as we're going to talk about in this video, is his main selling point in general. It just so happens that they stacked him to astronomically ridiculous levels for PvE, irregardless of the darkness, but the darkness does continue to be his most important trait. That was the thing that was the selling point whenever we got the teasers for him, just because he is so useful in certain situations that call for it. Darkness has become one of the most popular and honestly the most broken of all dot damage effects, so being that he is easily the best user of it, makes him phenomenal for PvE. So finally we have Reaper's Judgment, which is going to actually be worth talking about even though it is a finisher, because this one doesn't just deal damage, it also applies blackout for 4 seconds to the target upon landing a skill that deals darkness damage equal to 30% again of attack for every 1 second and decreases power by 2%. So Dellons is another character in a new line of characters that is going to be able to apply an effect on his finishing move. I don't know how I feel about this going forward now that they've started doing this. I do feel like it is just a good excuse for them to start releasing new cards for characters that we've had cards for forever that now just have effects on them, and that makes us want to pull for yet more cards, but right now it tends to be on the Seven Knights characters, and I believe just Kula, Idle Kula that is, but I could be wrong. Correct me down in the comments if I'm missing anybody there. But let's go ahead and skill preview him. We'll take a look at these real quick. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at Deadly Strike next. That is going to be his S1, which is he's going to take a small lunge forward and then knock the opponents into the air. The hitbox on this is fantastic. Your XY axis is phenomenal. He's very good at vacuuming up waves with this move. This is actually going to be one of his more reliable waving skills, believe it or not. This does tend to, in certain situations, primarily against bosses that are moving around, or even in live PvP, I'm sure, but even in PV versus AI, this tends to be kind of a Hail Mary almost. If he misses this and they dodge through it, he leaves himself pretty prone, but overall for waving and for PvE, it is fantastic. So let's take a look at Breath of Death. This is his immunity skill. This one's interesting. So what this one's going to do is launch him forward, and he is going to spin around, knocking anything in the vicinity into the air behind him, and they'll get caught in that vortex. So this is actually a really nice move to kind of set up a combo. His Breath of Death, his S2 into his S1 is completely doable, but you want to make sure sometimes it will miss on the S1 if you loop it that way, if you don't time it correctly, just because the characters he's hitting with his S2 might be too high in the air to hit with that initial strike on Deadly Strike. So let's take a look at his S3. His S3 is his projectile, and basically what Dellons is going to do is he's going to jump backwards and throw out two of the biggest fireballs in the entire game. I mean, we're talking these things, the range on them. So these two guys, very tough, I would imagine, for somebody in live to dodge. But as far as waving goes, it does tend to split waves, I will say that. So if we're talking reviving Hell's Dungeon, robots, things like that, if you go to throw this out there to start, you may end up splitting that. But hey, it is a very, very good move, specifically in PV versus AI. And then next up we have his Reaper's Judgment, which is his first finisher, his inherent finisher. This is the one that does apply darkness. It does have quite a long startup, which is nice for a lot of reasons. But actually, if you look at him for maybe time attack, these have actually, with the time attack master mode that I've been able to actually play with him in this weekend, he actually does really well with these two finishers, specifically because they have a bit of a startup on them. So you can throw those out there before the next wave even shows up, and then by the time they show up, he'll be doing the actual damage, which is nice. And then finally, you have Abyss of Death, which is the coolest finisher in the game, let's be honest. He summons out that giant demon guy, or maybe he turns into a demon, I don't know. I don't know the lore behind the Seven Knights, but it's a fantastic looking finisher, and it is going to be a full screen effect, and it's basically, whenever this goes off, he's nuking whatever's on the field. So keep that in mind. If you get this off, it's pretty much curtains for whatever is out there. So those are his skills. He looks awesome, as we've talked about, Skill Lord and also Edgelord Supreme. So next up, I do want to talk about a little bit here before we get into the showcase, the stones. So these are going to be the Seven Knights Collab Stones, and they are busted. We all know this now. They are ridiculous. So the biggest reason being is the fact that, not these effects, but it's actually the fact that they give two separate sources of a 10% boost to attack, or whatever stat you're picking them for, and that equals out to be 60% to your attack. So whenever you see 100k Shane running around, 100k CP that is, or you look at Dellons and he's sitting around close to 90k CP, I'm sure maybe even people out there have him somehow higher than that. He is these stones. It's all about the stones, and for whatever reason they decided it was a good idea, and here we are. So if you wonder why this collab is so broken and so worth your rubies, it is probably mostly because of these stones. Not to take anything away from these characters, but they're ridiculous. So next I'm going to briefly talk about kind of best equips. Now, this is really dependent upon, and this is up for debate, this is really dependent upon what mode you're wanting to play him in. For me personally, I have access to the Tekken set, and so therefore I like to use it. I found that when it comes to his abilities to kind of lock the clock, so to speak, this is going to help him with that immensely. It almost puts him on par with Nameless in his ability to spam and his finishers and stop clocks. So I do enjoy this on him for modes where you need to buy as much time as possible. Do keep in mind though, you are sacrificing some attack, which he does want. And then speaking of, if you want to talk about attack options for him for set cards, honestly, Akane or Leah are going to be your best bet, or Akane. You guys can tell me in the comments which one it is, but either way, either two of those Fest sets are going to be what's best for him. They're perfect options. They're going to boost his attack up, and they're going to basically make that darkness damage just that much better, and make his damage output just that much better as a result. And then as far as options go, you can do what you want with him. I do honestly think, depending on the mode, you may decide that you want to go for something that gives him super armor when he's being attacked, or at least maybe like a Tekken option if you are lucky enough to have it, or even the new Eileen card, which should be right here. So yeah, if you want to give him something like that, I don't blame you. He also gets a nice attack boost from the Tekken option, but I realize not everybody has that. And otherwise, you can go with any of the cooldown reduction cards. You can maybe go with one of the Fess options, or you can go with the old reliable of the Maxima, but it's up to you. So that is going to be the overview for Dellons. I believe we've covered everything here, so let's go ahead and jump into the review, you guys, and I'll see you on the other side. But before I forget, yeah, I knew we were forgetting something. All right, boys, let's get it. Leading up to his release, after we had seen the teasers for him, my biggest interest in Dellons stemmed not just from his darkness damage ability, but also his mobbing ability. If you look at his skills, you can already tell without even having to use them that the XY axis associated with them is going to be very strong, and it is. If you take a look at these clips here, you'll see just how well he does at vacuuming up these waves and reviving Hell's Dungeon and just carving through the stages. Now, I will say at this point in the game, he is probably, for the blue color, the absolute best for mobbing. There really isn't a whole lot of competition there for him at this point, just based solely upon the fact that he outputs so much raw damage, and then he also has some very generous cooldowns associated. Do keep in mind that his S3 does tend to split mobs, such as the ever-annoying stunlock bots, but outside of a few issues with him having those splits, his overall mobbing is phenomenal. I am, however, going to have to concede that because he does tend to split mobs, I do have to dock him just a bit, but it's only just that, a bit. At this point, there's very little that can be said about Dellons in the negative in this regard, and overall, I think that if you build him up for these reasons, or at least this is one of the reasons you're thinking about building him up for, you're going to be very happy with the investment. When Psyche introduced darkness damage into the game, little did any of us realize just how important a part it would play going forward in this game. But here we are, with Dellons completely ramping it up to a completely different level, and making himself not just a source of dark damage, but the best source of darkness damage. And as such, for modes where darkness damage is required, such as the Elite Guild Raid mode for Omega Rugal, Dellons is the #1 draft pick. There is no denying just how well he does at not only freezing the clock with his spammable finishers, but also his insane amounts of DPS output. There is no character that I have ever witnessed able to put out the amount of damage that he is able to do on some of these bosses. However, keep in mind, he does tend to be, because he is an attack type, a little bit squishy. You'll want to dodge specific nukes from bosses, especially in the elite levels of the Guild Raid boss. But overall, that is a small downside for a character that is able to shred characters the way he can. When it comes to his awakened ability, he is able to spam those moves and put out just that much more damage. And if you're able to take the shields down on a character like Omega Rugal and get that darkness damage applied, then he is going to be shredding his defenses. Any other boss can't even stand a chance. And if you're needing a blue or needing somebody with darkness, Dellons is your #1 pick. Full disclosure, in this part of the review, I was not able to use Dellons in League because attack types are out of season, so that part of this review is going to have to be left undone. So we're going to have to settle for Infinite Battle. But when it comes to PV versus AI, as you probably could have guessed, nothing can stand up to Dellons. If you are going up against the AI, Dellons is going to completely and utterly melt whatever's in front of him. It doesn't seem as though the AI knows how to handle a lot of his skills, and even against characters that are fully maxed out, as you can see in these clips, he is able to just wipe them out. I made a point not even to use the finishers in some of these for a good reason. Dellons is absolutely ridiculous when it comes to being able to just tear down these meta characters. And at the end of the day, I don't really see the review skewing itself once I'm able to use him in League. I don't see it being much different results. At the end of the day, Dellons is going to be a top flight pick for not just blue characters, but characters in general when it comes to PV versus AI. As you can see here against this Psyche, he doesn't even get a chance to do anything, and that is going back to the fact that once you get off his finisher, the game is pretty much over. In summary, Dellons does have his weaknesses, like any character will. Yes, he does tend to not be able to take a hit, and you'll want to avoid taking any unnecessary damage as a result. But at the end of the day, outside of that and splitting mobs here and there with his skills, Dellons is easily one of the best picks for PvE in general. Not just when they call for darkness damage, Dellons is going to shred almost anything you put in front of him, and I have no issue in predicting he will be useful for months and months to come. He is worth picking up. Get him before he goes. Those are just my thoughts, guys. Be sure to let me know yours in the comment section below. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys get him. Peace. So as a nice little ending to the video, I figure I'll go ahead and summon on some tokens. I did pick them up using some of my Google Play rewards I've been compiling, so we'll see if we get lucky. We're going to go for the Shane and Rudy banner. I'm probably not going to get any. Oh, well, there's that. I'm probably not going to get anything, but whatever. It would be so nice to get Shane or Rudy, but... Oh. Okay. Well, we'll take that. I think that was the... Is that the... Yeah, that's the finisher card. Oh, awesome. Great. Just tease me with the Rudy I'll never get. Oh, well. Well, maybe we'll get lucky here. Let's go, guys. Who knows? But I doubt we'll get that lucky. But hey, that's cool. Maybe down the road here we can try and go for this banner a little bit more. Oh, we got red. That's something. But let's see. Oh, got a Fess. Well, let's see. You watch, it'll end up being Rachel. That or it'll be Shane. If it's Shane, I'm cool with that. But yeah, it's definitely not going to be... Wait, is that... Oh, no! No way!